Did you guys know that there's a talent gap in cybersecurity? Has anyone ever told you that? No? Is this brand new information for you? Okay, I have big news. There is a talent gap in cybersecurity, specifically in North America. Didn't know if you knew that. We're going to have a whole panel about it with some real experts. They're going to come to the stage. So, for our cybersecurity talent gap panel, I'd like to introduce Steve Graham, the Senior VP of EC Council. Steve. There he is. Bonnie Butlin.
Go take it one.
Is she out there? Co-founder and executive director of the Security Partners Forum. Welcome, Bonnie. Danny Aniag, the program lead for cybersecurity of Durham College. Welcome, Danny. The one, the only, Mr. Bashir Fancy. He's on the management board of ICCP. Welcome, Bashir. Hugh Burley, the Director of Information Security at Thompson Rivers University. Welcome back to the stage, Hugh.
Thank you, Amber.
And Jamie Rees, the CISO of NB Power, will be our moderator. Come on out, Jamie. Oh, I'm going to shake your hand, but there you go. It's okay.
I think we can sit down.
Yeah.
A little bit of microphone difficulty there at the last second. Welcome back.
I think he's at the...
I know we got everybody's
Test,
name
test.
just now, but I'm going to ask for everyone to quickly run down the panel here to tell us who they are, where they're from, a little bit about why we should be listening to them on this topic. So I'll start. I am Jamie Rees. You heard from me earlier today. I know you were all here diligently paying attention. And I am the CISO and responsible for physical and cybersecurity at New Brunswick Power, including generation, transmission, distribution, and customer products, so all the way across the line, which is exciting. Another thing that I hold dear to my heart is helping kids in New Brunswick find a path to technology and cybersecurity careers. It made a difference in my life when I was 15 or 16 to get that first computer. And so I feel that, a foundational change in my life and the outcomes of my own well-being. So it's very important to me, this topic on how we might be able to do that for people of all different kinds of situations. So we'll start with you, since you're here with me.
All right. Well, I'm Hugh Burley. I'm the Director of Information Security for Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops, British Columbia, and the ISO for BCNet. And like all of you, I am in the process of trying to hire talented individuals to fill out analyst roles within my department. And this will be a great opportunity for us all to discuss how we get there.
So my name is Bashir Fancy. I'm on the board of ICCP. But very quickly, I'll give you just slightly additional things so you will find it relevant for what we're going to talk about later. My career is out of Pricewaterhouse into Canada, ran operations with Citibank, ran third-party processing, then went to Visa, and I was then the global head of internal audit and risk management for Visa up in California. PCI, therefore, you can throw darts at me or say it's a good thing, whichever, we'll come to that. But after that, I've been helping Deloitte, Grant Thornton, and many other banks and organizations globally. So that's my background.
Very nice. Hi, my name is Danny Aniag. I'm the program lead for the cybersecurity program at Durham College. I guess I am the education sector representative in this panel. I'm heavily involved with the artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cybersecurity research project in Durham College under the ORC group. So I'm glad to be here.
Hello, Bonnie Butlin, co-founder Security Partners Forum, as well as executive director for the International Agile Network that we operate internationally, working with over 700 professional associations and with SECRA, the Women in Security and Resilience Alliance. Thank you.
I'm Stephen Graham. I'm the Senior Vice President of EC Council. So I lead all of our international initiatives around education technologies, all of our partnerships, all of our business through North America rolls up into me. So really looking forward to this panel.
All right, thanks. So, I mentioned earlier, and then through the introductions we heard how important it is, and how, we see stories every day about challenges that people like me and our panelists, and I'm sure folks in the audience have, trying to draw people into these roles or filling roles. They remain vacant sometimes for months in advertisings, and it gets very hard. And I think from the perspectives of our panelists here, we'll see, get your notepads out, because I think we're going to see some advice that will help change that for our organizations if we pay attention. So we're going to talk about culture. We're going to talk about bringing new people in. We're going to talk about having people from other career paths coming back into the workforce, coming to the cybersecurity, and a number of other things like that. So I think there's a wide swath. We're going to talk about education and industry partnerships. I think is a very important piece that we need to touch on to make sure that regardless of where those people are, if they're new to cybersecurity, they get ramped up appropriately. That's important. So I'm going to start, though, with the notion. I debated in my head about whether we would call this reskilling or maybe just plain not ignoring people that used to work for us in our organizations, maybe in technology and maybe not, but they're now returning from maternity leave perhaps, or other types of long-term disability type things or what have you, and they're coming back to the workforce, and perhaps that is an untapped a wealth of resources that we can make use of. So I'm going to ask Bonnie to start, because I know through our conversations as we were setting the panel up that she had some very strong thoughts on this and some commitment to make to people about this. So please.
Thanks. I am hearing continuously, like I mentioned earlier today, that in the UK, US, and Canada, and I'm sure elsewhere, that once women drop out, they don't come back in. For a number of different barriers and hurdles, and it can be for any number of reasons. And what's interesting is that it didn't matter why they left the workforce. The common denominator was that they couldn't get back in. And I think some of it is structural, some of it is because of the hiring pipelines. For example, when I started working in this area, about 10 years ago, students were unpaid interns, and they were treated as effectively cheap labor, and off you go, and you can find a job somewhere else in many of the cases. It's completely changed right now, where students are bridged in much more easily and recruited, and it's just a very different kind of recruiting process in government, and I'm sure it varies in the private sector quite a lot. But it's hard to predict which class is going to have an easier time given on what the particular hiring strategies are. And if it's always focused on the current class that's graduating from the different programs or the current need of the day, you're leaving behind a huge portion of the population, which are those who already were committed and started in this profession, but now are not being considered for a variety of reasons.
So, Bonnie, maybe just before we pass it on, do you have some thoughts around what a company like mine could do? What should I do tomorrow when I'm back in my, not tomorrow, but the next day when I'm back in my office and I'm facing this open positions that I have? Do I go to my HR people and say, what do you got? What's the next step for somebody like me?
This is really challenging because HR are following certain processes or best practices or business imperatives at the time, and that may not align to what is required in cybersecurity or ITIM, and what's the best practice at that time for that part of the company. One example, I'm Aboriginal myself, Métis, and one of the things that I've encountered is that a lot of companies and government want you to self-identify as visible minority, Aboriginal, women, to increase the number of candidates and the workforce there. But the problem that a lot of Aboriginal people are facing is the assumption is that you're technical only, beginning, very low level of skill at this point, and we're just trying to get everybody in at the entry level, which is well-intentioned, but it actually limits that group of candidates and employees. And it's frustrating to be told, well, you're only good at technical aspects because you're in that Aboriginal category, for example. And I think we have to, in hiring, get past the good intentions, in a sense, and balance it at least with competence and with skills that are required.
So let's walk this way down our panel, and we'll go to Danny next, and then we'll wrap back around to the end. Danny, do you have some thoughts on getting people back into the workforce that may be lost in some way or weren't traditionally looked at as a new grad and therefore kind of the hot talent to grab?
It's important that you mentioned a while ago, what will you do when you get back to your company, and what's the first thing that you have to do to start upskilling them. I guess for me, I'm going to start with creating a baseline of the people that I have and the talents and the skills that they have, because in order for me to move from one point to the other, I need to know where I'm starting from. And to have that baseline, that talent baseline in that company gives you some sort of an idea of which particular areas to actually reinforce or to train. And in so doing, eventually you get to know whether should I upskill or should I hire from the outside. And it's a whole lot of discussion, and I know that later on we're going to talk about, is it better to just upskill them or is it better to basically hire from the outside? But irregardless of which strategy you do, it's important you start with a baseline. After having the baseline, it's important that you've got to understand, you've got to train them. And identifying what kind of training is important, but more so the kind of how you deliver that training to these people. It's important that you know, given the circumstances of your workforce, whether they're telecommuting, whether they're kind of senior in the workforce, you have to give them the right kind of medium to train them. And in the end, you also have to adopt a strategy that says, how do we have a sustainable security workforce? It's one that you're able to come up with a program that attracts and train them, but how do you make it sustainable? And that is, for me, is the key to making it, filling the void in terms of this skills gap.
Great, thanks. Bashir.
I think part of the challenge in bringing is that we have a problem first ourselves in that, do we need what skills are required for that particular job? We don't do that. We seem to build job around people, we like them, and so we structure job around people, which is actually a mistake. So now if you're going to bring people back, I created some rules at Visa globally that I wanted people to be out of that department into operations, into marketing, into different areas. The whole purpose was that you cannot be a good security person unless you understand the entire business, right? It's critical. We go siloed into security. Well, you're not going to be able to do it properly, because one of the things we were talking earlier down there is about the fact that I was the global head for risk management and security. So the question is, we don't do risk management. That's one of the problems. We go bang into the siloed environments, and it doesn't work very well. So now about the people that we're talking about, how do you bring them back? Exactly as what Denny is saying, you get the baseline of what people got, then I would go against what are the needs, which we don't review, right? And then you start to say, either I'll bring them in and I will train them for areas that they are missing, right? Because what is happening is they have not dealt with the other side of the business. I mean, how are you going to do that? Like one of the problems we're talking about the youngsters, and you quite rightly point out that we're bringing new people into the group, either from outside or people who had left us. One problem is if they left because of the fact that they had a personal issue or whatever, is one thing. But if they left because they were frustrated, because the management was a problem, because we didn't treat them right, or they were not getting trained, then we need to address those things before you bring them back. Otherwise, what have we done?
Just leave again.
Yeah. So we're going to lose them back again, or it'll just be. So I think the key here is to understand what are the needs. And we don't spend time and effort on that, right? Well, I've seen it firsthand on both sides of the fence. And then we'll talk later on about the language, because that's a big challenge.
All right, you.
Well, I don't think I've ever had anyone come back from IT. People don't leave IT at universities as a rule. They stay until they get old and gray and retire. But I think the one thing that I would be looking for anyone coming into the job, whether they're coming back, other than the baseline experience, and I assume someone who's returning to work is going to come with a lot of experience, broad experience, and that would be very useful. But they really have to be interested in information security. That would be the key for me. Are you truly interested in this area? Is there something that drives you to want to do this? And I don't really have to know what it is that drives them, but they have to be driven to do the job. And that would be the one thing that I would look for above all else.
So not just aptitude, but attitude or
Yeah, I mean,
genuine interest in the
we
topic.
can train people, especially someone who has broad IT experience or has spent perhaps many years in an organization and understands how the organization works. That experience and knowledge is so valuable. The information security side, assuming they have the interest, we can train them on that. We can get them there.
Okay. And all the way back down to Steve for a thought on this topic.
So I think a part of the problem revolves around the very term cybersecurity, right? Cybersecurity has kind of become a little bit of a junk term. And what I mean by that is we're summarizing all of the different roles in information assurance and IT security into this cybersecurity realm. And that means something different to everyone. They're going to define it on their own way. And that could create an unnecessary barrier to entry for a lot of people, right? So as we start looking at how this profession evolves out, and you start looking at individual job roles inside of cybersecurity, I think that's where the real interest lies. My interest is not in cybersecurity. My interest might be as a SOC analyst. I might really enjoy triaging a network, but I don't really want to be the guy that leads the hunt, right? But I might be another guy who really enjoys the hunt. Or I might be a girl who my analytical skills are just off the charts. So being able to identify from a forensic process where these people have been on the network. So I think a part of this, and I believe this is going to be asked later in the panel, but a part of it is how we define the individual job roles and how we classify cybersecurity job roles, and that creates a landing point for employees. And that's one of the places where we see a huge gap between educators and HR and the organizations, and then this frustration, I can't fill the role. Well, the question is, have you really defined the role? Or have we just assumed, okay, cybersecurity, we know we're concerned with cybersecurity, we're going to put some cybersecurity roles up there. But as you start to define those things out, give these people a landing place, define it a little bit better, and then you can identify if there's strengths and weaknesses based on the demographic or the candidate that you're looking for. So I think it starts to shape up a little bit.
That touches on a personal note for me, and I have a great deal of respect for the people in my HR department where I work. But they have a set of rules and processes that they're following, and we have a very strong labor relations group that kind of classifies people, et cetera, et cetera. So when I'm trying to find somebody called a cybersecurity analyst, technically that position doesn't exist. There's no such thing. What we have is maybe IT services 1 through 4 or some kind of banding name like that. And you're right on, of course, that in order to get the right person, and I think I heard this numerous times from several of the panelists, in order to get the right person into the right job, you have to know what it is you want them to do, what that job consists of, whether you're going to call that boundaries or drawing a box or whatever it is. You have to understand what you want that person to do. Then you can go find that piece. Sometimes it is challenging in certain organizations to map that. Look, I've been doing this for 18 years, but I'm going to say still, for a fairly new endeavor in a lot of people's minds around cybersecurity, what a role is supposed to be in a certain thing, that they can understand and take back through their HR processes and work all the way through. I think we should follow that thread instead of waiting for later. Let's just keep talking about that for a minute. How do we figure out what job role we have so that we can make sure that the right people with the right aptitudes and put them in the right training, they get there? So, Steve, if you had anything else to add to that thought, and
yeah, I think the important thing is when you look at these frameworks and how they apply to an organization, you have to look at what you're protecting. So you don't need a sledgehammer to crack a nut, right? So depending on what it is that I need to protect in the organization, I need to envelop that with the proper cybersecurity roles to ensure that that is protected. So if I'm protecting, like in your case, if it's an industrial control system, I need people shrouded around that ICS system. I need to make sure that there's no unauthorized access to that system because it could have detrimental effects to a wide population, where another business may have an entirely different thing that they protect. So I think keeping that in context to make sure that whatever role you choose is serving a specific business function. And you have to understand the business in order to define those roles. But then there are numerous frameworks out there to decide, if I want someone that, let's say for instance, every single organization should be either outsourcing or monitoring their logs on a daily basis to ensure that they can identify when something bad is happening on their network. Pretty simple function, right? That's log analysis. It's basic SOC level 1 type work. Not to say that it's basic or it's easy to do, but it's pretty much an entry-level role. That should exist pretty much everywhere. And you can identify parts of these frameworks where every organization should have certain fundamental roles or at least some kind of way to handle it. If it's outsourced to a service provider, if it's going out to a consultant, or if it's an internal staff, identify that piece and make sure it all centers around what it is that you protect. And then build the organization with some idea. We're kind of at a point now in the profession, we don't have to make up titles. I don't think we have to make up an identification of knowledge, skills, and abilities to a certain position. We just need to transform them into intelligence, meaning take some of the frameworks that are out there or some ideas of how to do these jobs, and then make them relevant to the organization that we're protecting. So that log analysis might be a specific feed on a specific SIM, but the actual work itself is already pretty well defined in different frameworks.
And if you guys will forgive the intentional but bad pun, my team is quite small, so everybody has to be a utility player, as they say in baseball and in energy production. The larger companies may be able to say, you do only this and you do only that. For some of us, maybe we have to mix and match a little bit more. So we've done some work with, for example, the NIST NICE framework and try to figure out which jobs are which. Oftentimes we end up taking two and going like that because that's just the reality of we are. Bonnie, do you have some thoughts on describing job roles and getting people in them?
Yeah, and the flip side of that, which is how do people apply for positions? And I think it really is a tension between the generalist and the specialist. Are you looking for somebody who does specifically this tiny little thing and they've been doing it for 10 years and they have 10 years of experience at X, Y, and Z companies? They'll probably get that position. If you're a younger employee, you're probably not going to get it if you're looking for that kind of specificity with lots of experience behind it. It really is a maze to try and navigate where to find that position for you, because a new entrant into the sector isn't going to have that experience, but if they try to tailor the CV to show that they're really good at that one little thing, I'm new, I'm starting out and I can do this one thing really well, I don't have the experience, then it can also be hard to move up, because you've presented yourself to the organization as I do just this very narrowly, and then you're out of the generalist category. Whereas the generalists, the pressure on that side, particularly, in the sector, is the constant retraining. There are so many candidates, and this is the flip side. If the organization doesn't know what kind of candidate they want or what kind of general or specific needs they want, then you'll probably get way too many applicants. And then the competition is, well, who is the top tier of that? Somebody who has the engineering degree, plus the computer science degree, plus the other experience, and it just goes on. So again, if you're, let's say, somebody trying to get back into the workforce, male, female, you're now competing with anybody and everybody, plus you may need to have multiple degrees, plus you're going to have experience that you didn't get while you were out of the workforce. It really does seem to be a very daunting challenge to even know how to even search for a position, whether you're starting out mid-career or later, and even how to move up within the organization, because there's no clarity across the board. and certainly not across public, private, not-for-profit sectors on how to move yourself up in a career. And so it's difficult for organizations, it's difficult for the job searchers, and this is where we're seeing this mismatch of we have hundreds of thousands of positions, why aren't we filling them with the people and retaining them? So it's the definition, I think absolutely correct, defining what it is you're looking for and communicating that to people so that you get the right people applying, not 40,000 people applying for one job, and then you have completely unrealistic expectations of who should fill that and then have it mismatch at the end of the line.
So, Danny, do you see from the college perspective, industry coming and saying, we need people, and they're not really sure what they need? Is that?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
I knew the answer to that, but.
Right, and more to Bonnie's point is that the problem with being a generalist and a specialist is basically a chicken and egg thing. We are basically kind of suggested to be a generalist in terms of our program learning outcomes, not to be vendor specific. However, in the field of cybersecurity, you cannot really, you cannot be too unbiased to say that at least you know this tool for this particular vendor. So at some point, you have to be a specialist too. So they're expecting you to be a generalist and a specialist, and when you're applying, you cannot say both. And we were able to actually conduct some sort of a research in our college about that, and we came to a point wherein when you're applying, you still need to come up with a job nomenclature in your resume. And that's one thing we've realized. And more to Steve's point a while ago, if you want to look at which particular nomenclature you would like to apply to, you have to look at the framework, because the framework tells you what kind of skill sets and expectations are being set forth with that particular role. However, most people who are coming back to the job workforce, or those who have just recently graduated, don't know the right nomenclature to put in their job profile. So we come up with an idea that it is possibly better to put in or to look at industry certs, because most industry certification, for instance, at EC Council, they basically map to a specific framework, like NIST. CEH of EC Council is mapped to NIST. So if you're a recent grad, for instance, and you want to actually focus on forensic audit rather than hacking itself, EC Council has their own certification that does that for you. And in a way, you're able to hit two birds with one stone, because now you can say, I am well adapted with NIST framework because I have this certification. So that could be a good starting point. Now, the problem is this. Most colleges and universities don't have their program learning outcomes mapped directly to a specific industry certification. Most of the program learning outcomes we've reviewed, 32 different program learning outcomes from different universities and colleges, are all generalist program learning outcomes. And that, we felt, is where the gap is. If we're talking about delivering a cybersecurity program, we cannot help but at some point be a specialist, but probably you're starting as a generalist. So there's a push right now in our college to actually have the first year being a generalist kind of course delivery, and then on the second year, we're going to come up with more what particular major or specialization you would like to focus into. That way, we're able to help those students put up the right job nomenclature to put in their CV and resume.
Great. So, Bashir, just forgive me. Yeah. I'm gonna hop to Hugh, because he's another education-angled person. Just see if he has anything to follow on with that thought.
I think Danny has hit some of the salient points, but in my experience, the kids who are coming out of colleges and universities, out of computing science programs and two-year diplomas, aren't ready for the workforce for the most part. They just don't have the understanding of the environments that they're going into. They haven't had the hands-on intensive work with networks and servers and And all those systems that we as IT professionals have learned more through the years of working than we learned during school, which is fine. I mean, you recognize that young people especially are going to come into the workforce with limited skill sets. But I think that's where we have to start applying the certifications, not during necessarily the learning programs in colleges and universities, but when they're in the workforce and are actually dealing day to day with real world issues. That's when those certifications really pay off quickly. If you're getting certified, for example, on Cisco products in school, you hit the workforce and it's all HP, Juniper, Palo Alto. You're not really in any better position than any other person coming off the street. You may have some general ideas, but you can't sit down at those consoles and do the job yet. So I think that's where we have to focus, is that post-academic training. And I really think that's where certifications pay back so quickly.
If I could
Right.
just add very quickly to that, the certifications are critical. But if you've left the workforce for whatever reason, how do you maintain your certs? How do you get a cert if you're not currently working? And then even in that middle career position, now you're at another disadvantage because you're stuck in between both of those things. You may have the experience, but not the current certification if you're out for a couple of years at a time.
Yeah, that's a very interesting challenge, that sandwich spot where you're working and you're meeting all your performance objectives and whatnot, but perhaps your company's not providing the training and the upgrading to keep you moving. And I think we hear that from a lot of candidates when we interview them is, well, what's the training program look like? Are you going to keep me moving? Because I think we all agree in cybersecurity, it's a never-ending learning cycle. Bashir, do you have a last word on this topic?
I think there's two sides to this coin. We're looking at one part, and before I get to that part, one of the the root causes of this is that you see organizations, they chase the shiny objects, right? You don't know your needs. The vendor tells you you need this badly. I've had people approach me at Visa, at Citibank, at whatever company, but in there I was in a different role because now I was able to turn around. I had people come up to me, and I look at them, this is crazy. Is that our need? And we keep buying stuff. You heard how many pieces of software we have, and nobody knows. And we were talking earlier about the integration group being told, no, I don't need to have you in there. We're talking with this vendor. It's ridiculous because it just doesn't make any sense. But that's the culture we're coming from. So we got one problem is we don't know our needs. We got vendor telling you we are siloed heavily, right? So that you don't see the bigger picture. Now you're going to bring somebody new in there. The guy's going to get crucified because he doesn't know your environment exactly as you pointed out. I think there's a desperate need. I look back at from a solution standpoint, when I was doing my CA with Pricewaterhouse, right, start my career there, I was articled to somebody, okay, in the company that happened to be a senior partner. His job was to take me once a week, spend X number of hours, guide me. I would have 40 questions. I don't have to be worried about asking him. He's training me. My pass or fail of the exams is going to reflect on him too, not just me, right? So what happened was he would spend all the time, and of course, I learned very well under some very good people. Where's that for cybersecurity or for risk management? It doesn't exist.
I have an answer for that.
But I'll tell you very quickly why. We took few people, as an example, there's a gentleman here working on this very project, and I am involved working with some guys like that, in that you take the university on one side, you take the certification like ICCP and whatever, EC Council, whatever. What happens is you take these guys into the corporate world to actually being trained, like article literally, which is part of the requirements of the course, right? So you don't get that. Now you're doing exactly what you just suggested, which is that they may not get the whole training yet, or it'll take 5 years for them to get ready. All these new guys, that requires companies, the corporation to invest. It requires government to invest. It requires universities to get involved in doing kind. And now you can do the type of thing we're talking about. It'll be far more meaningful because the second one part of the problem on risk management and security is that we seem to do things when we are forced to. PCI is not something I wanted to do because it was a great thing. I was forced to do that. Why the heck did I come up with a standard which we already had rules? So I was forced by the government to say we will block your Visa cards and all that, which started that. The question is, Sarbanes-Oxley, anti-money laundering. The last part I want to say is you got SOX and everybody's complying with this. How many people went to jail for breaking all the rules? Please point out to me. One person. So what happened? It does not work. Compliance does not work because you are forced to do, not because you want to do it. What we need the paradigm to shift is you would want to do that because it's the right thing for your organization. Then this type of problem.
I'm going to tell you just a brief anecdote again. I'm going to escalate use my moderator privilege to tell an anecdote about myself because I think it's an exact answer to your question, and I think you're 100% right. I think you're so right that I actually started doing this a year and a half ago. We built what you might call an apprenticeship program, or you were calling it articling. We actually call it the cybersecurity intern program because we're still in works with the government to make the provincial government make an official apprenticeship. But I come from an industry where it's very hard to get people to be power line technicians. Those are the folks that climb up tall things near deadly currents in the very worst weather, et cetera, to put the power back on for us. There's actually an apprenticeship program where you take people in, they do some classroom training, they do some field training, they do some classroom training. Over 5 years, they escalate themselves to becoming a full power line technician. We built that into our cybersecurity program at MB Power. We used that same formula. We said, here's what we would pay. Back to this, what kind of jobs are we going? We called it, this is what we would pay a cybersecurity analyst. So we're going to take an intern and pay them half, because that's what we were going to, somebody with no experience, none whatsoever. I hired a 17-year-old high school graduate last year and put them in this program. So little tiny bit of cyber titan experience and really nothing else. It works. Look, we work in a company that has to have different levels of security clearances throughout. We sat down and said, every day through the next 5 years, this is what this person's job is going to look like. Day 1, day 2, day 365. Then they'll be ready to get that first level of clearance, day 366 to whatever. And then they can get the next, and we can build their career that way. We're paying for him to go to university part-time while we do this, the same way we would have a professional development for anybody that works for us. We are literally growing our own cybersecurity analysts out of this program. That person reports to me. Like your articling comment, I am fully responsible for that person's success. And that's why it works, because I don't want to fail. If you just hired them and said, you're the intern, and left, that's why you get so many horror stories about going to get coffee and stuff, right? Because they're not brought in and made to do stuff, and it hasn't been thought out, and we didn't all these comments that we heard earlier. So it can work. We solved it for us. I think a problem, that solution could work with tweaks in other spots. I'm not saying it's perfect. We still got work to do on it, but it worked for us. So I wanted to use that as a segue because I think it's a great question. I obviously love the idea. But let's go back down to Steve and just talk about, because I know you had some involvement with some apprentice-type programs in the past, and you might be able to share with us that notion. And I will say I hired a 17-year-old, and I'm hiring 2 more high school graduates this year. But I think the apprenticeship program could actually work for people throughout, regardless of age and education and whatnot.
Sure. So in your point, I think you made a very key statement saying, we sat down and we mapped out what day 1 is going to look like. We mapped out what day 2 all the way through 365, and we gave them a plan and how they're going to escalate in the organization. So full circle, if you look at, what are the 3 main tenets of an apprenticeship program, or 4 actually? You need an educator with content. You need an employer who's willing to take on the apprentice, and you need funding, and you need the apprentice, right? So let's say we can get all those. Quite honestly, all of those are pretty easy to find. You can call an employer and say, listen, I can solve your pipeline problem. We're going to build an apprenticeship program there. I've got 5,000 students in local universities in your area. We've got funding. In fact, we've got millions of dollars of funding available for this kind of thing if you just connect the dots. Are you ready? The problem is they haven't sat down and mapped out that day 1, day 2, day 3. And until that happens, the apprenticeship program fails, because they're thinking cybersecurity. These people are going to be analyzing my network. These people are going to be pen testing. These people are going to have access to the CEO's mailbox. How do I take a 17-year-old apprentice and give them the keys to the kingdom in my organization? Well, the answer is you don't have to. What you need to do is define out their role and define out the scope and what they do on a day-to-day basis. That's the place where we've seen really the scalability of apprenticeship programs. When we talk about doing this across the nation or across North America, that's the place where it's falling down, is the employers taking the time to define what the apprenticeship role looks like. So we've tried building some guidance and things around that, but that's still the place where it's falling down. So we've got work to do in that area, but if we can solve that piece and get everybody to define, within my organization, this is what I protect, this is what my apprentices will do, and understand this is a long-term solution. It's something 5-6 years from now, you have a scalable solution where if everyone participates in that, then you'll know when you're hiring a candidate who came out of another group, they also went through an apprenticeship program to get into that group. And now you have the value of an apprentice. Right now, if you're the only person doing apprenticeships and they leave, you're kind of out of luck.
So I think if we toss our minds back to the olden days, so to speak, a blacksmith's apprentice spent a year making nails before they were allowed to do anything else, right? And that's how we see our cybersecurity analysts. We give them important work. It's stuff that needs to get done. Everyone needs those nails. And then they get, while they're making nails, a little tiny bit more and a little tiny bit more, and then they grow into the role. Bonnie, do you have some thoughts on apprenticeship-style programs or how they might work?
One thing I've been thinking a lot about lately is the younger and younger hiring of people. And there are a range of these programs that go right down into the high school. This has been under discussion for well over a decade with particularly the U.S. military and other organizations of, do we really need to get them at the master's level? Can we get them at the university level? Maybe a bachelor's degree level. Well, maybe we don't need bachelor's degrees anyway. Maybe second year is okay of university. And that dropped down to, well, maybe if they're just in university or college, that's good enough. And we can select our candidates from this pool. Then it went down even further, and this was special operations as well. The idea was maybe we're being too narrow in our recruiting. Maybe we can identify candidates before they even get to the universities and colleges. So it went down to the high school level. And I think from a security perspective, this is also problematic. It may work, and it clearly is working in some cases, but is it scalable? Because
Scalability is tough, no question.
Yeah, how do you vet these teenagers? Even millennials, many still living at home into their 30s. Are you really going to have a criminal record if you're still living at home? What about your credit check? If you're in grade 11, what kind of credit history do you have? These are the indicators that we rely on for security clearances. Your criminal background checks and your credit history. These may not be the indicators we should be using. From a security standpoint, yes, we have to vet because they're on systems. But how do you vet people? And I don't think that's the missing piece still. How do you select the high schoolers for these positions to invest so much into their apprenticeships or whatever we're calling it now? These training, learning programs, you're putting a lot into these kids effectively. How do we really vet that now, and is how we're vetting them now really the way to go?
Go ahead.
Well, what I want to add, and you're absolutely 100% on the money. One of the things that's undermining our success badly is the fact that the culture of the organization is at the heart of some of these problems. Because it's not just silo, the culture is really not up to sniff, right? We don't build soft skills. If you go to any universities, you're not going to learn soft skills. It's just not done. And soft skills are critical if you're going to succeed in some of these roles because it requires interaction. You don't go to CEO and ask him to give me money because I'm going to put 2048-bit encryption, all that. He's flying over his head. He doesn't care. He's looking at the shareholder value the fact that he's making bottom line because his bonus is tied to that. He's not interested in that. We don't turn around and tell him that, by the way, I can save you, $2 million, I can increase productivity. That's not how risk management or security guys talk. They don't get the money because they are seen as the expense. All this thing, we need to turn the paradigm on that and make it an investment which has got tremendous payback, but it requires soft skill and requires the culture of the organization. That is a problem right now, is impacting right across. Would you agree? It's one of the big issues?
Yes, and it's an odd situation at the end of the day too, because as we've reduced our requirements for recruitment purposes, if not necessarily for hiring for permanent positions, but at least for recruitment purposes, we've lowered down into high school. And yet the requirements of cybersecurity and all the disciplines surrounding it are increasing all the time. And when you look at a lot of job ads today, you're looking at computer science degrees still, and the certifications, which require years of experience. So is it meshing that we're reducing and increasing at the same time?
Part of our mapping out that we talked about, actually, that day 1 to day 365 and on includes development programs to get them not only certified, but the hands-on training that they need so that they can start building towards, and we had to lay down basically and say, there's certain work here that requires secret level clearance. They can never go near that. Obviously, they can't do it. There's some that only requires a background check from the local police office. Maybe we can work with that, even with a teenager, right? So there's some stuff, and there was a lot of work involved in there. We didn't lower our standards. Our standards are the same to get to that full level. What we did was build a new set of standards, a new entry level to bring in that apprentice and build them to that spot where they would never, ever, in some cases, be able to get to on their own, because we said you must have this and 28 years experience. You guys have all read those ridiculous job ads that are out there sometimes, right? You need 10 years experience in a coding language that's been around for 5 and all that kind of stuff. We made a very clear line that said to be an apprentice, you can get by with almost nothing, and then we will build you into that next step. But it'll take 5 years, like Bashir said. Yeah. Danny.
So basically, in terms of the education sector, it's important to note that not only do we have to build, like what Bashar said, the soft skills and the hard skills, which is the technology, the component in terms of the hard skill includes the business side.
Yes,
right.
absolutely.
So a typical cybersecurity analyst has to understand the business process as well. Mm-hmm. That being said, going full circle to what Steve was mentioning about apprenticeship, we have instituted a mentorship program in our college, and that is the core fundamental of the success of most of our graduates. I was very lucky to actually bump into 3 of my graduates here in the room today, and I was asking them, what would you think is the biggest reason for you to landing a cybersecurity consultant role in the last 3 years? And they said it's the mentorship program. And what we've done is that in order for that to be a successful thing in our college is we build a program advisory committee. And what we do there is that we try to get the future employers involved ahead of time. So during that committee deliberation, we already talk to them what will be the plan, day 1 to day 365, and we get their full buy-in. And we tell them these are our candidates. You pick and choose which ones you like. And eventually, we start a partnership. And they hold on to these graduates, and they absorb them eventually. And that, we feel, is one of the key to success.
Great.
One thing, if I can add to that, is that last year, a friend of mine actually teaches at the university, evening classes, right? Where a lot of the people from corporate world who are actually in this area are there. Anyway, he told me this 2 o'clock that he was having to travel out of town. Could I take his class, which was 6 to 9 p.m.? I said, fine. He sends me the slides, which I can't make head or tail. You can go in and pick it up on the internet. And so I went and I told the students, look, I don't do this here, but I can't speak to the slides because I don't know where this guy is coming from. So would you like me to share with you 3-4 examples, real examples of what I saw from Visa in terms of this thing happening, why, how I dealt with it, what was good, bad? I did that. right? They didn't leave till 9:30, 10. They said it's closed down. We went to the cafeteria. I left from there at 12:30, right, at night. I said, I got a meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning. I got to get out. Next day, I get a call from the dean to say, well, what the heck did you do? Because all these guys are saying they learned more in those few hours than they did in the last few semesters. And I'm asking myself, what the heck did I do? All I did was share with them 3 or 4 real live examples, which tells me what? That they don't get that. They don't get the real thing. They're getting, theory is wonderful when you hit the real world. That theory is not it's going to fly out of the window. You got to think, which actually I used at that example, that there were 2 guys getting interviewed, right? After the interview is finished, one of them is going to get the job. And they're asked, there's a spire on top of this building. Do you know how tall the spire is? And the person says, I was an architect. I memorized all the measurements. It's 60 feet. Answer was 100% correct. Said, thank you, we're going to be in touch. So they were really impressed. Second guy, interview finished. They said, same question. Do you know how tall the spire is? He said, I don't know, but can you give me 2 minutes? And they were baffled. They thought he was going to Google it or whatever. He walked out, it's on the ground floor. This is actually a real example. Walked out of the building, measured the shadow with his feet to see how many steps there were, measured his own shadow. He knew he was 6 feet tall. He walked out. He said, look, the answer is not accurate, but within 3-4 feet, it's about 58 feet. The group that was interviewing, other than the CEO, all wanted to hire the guy who had answered 60 feet because it's the correct answer, rather than the guy who had said 58 feet, who was a critical thinker. That's the guy you want. You don't want the guy who had the correct answer, because the question will change, which is what? Cybersecurity and risk management is not a destination, it's a journey. It's a journey. You do one thing, the crooks will do 1.5. Then you catch up, they are ahead. So when people celebrate and say, oh, we hit this thing, it doesn't work like that, right? So this is an education for the corner suite too, right?
Absolutely.
So
The last word goes to Hugh. We'll give him another minute to just kind of give him his due, maybe a rebuttal to the
No rebuttal.
to Bashir.
I heard people talking about mentorship, and I just want to remind you that we are the mentors, the people in this room. If you get the opportunity to actually engage with a younger person or anyone who is interested in the field and provide that mentorship, take it, please. We need those people, and they're going to get the best education possible from working with you.
Absolutely a great piece of advice.
Absolutely.
Our panelists will be around. Please stop and chat with them in the hallway and whatnot. Thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure. We're all done. Thanks, Hugh.
Thanks, Jamie.
Jamie, fantastic.
Wonderful.
Excellent help with the discussion.